cloud and what that means specifically related to a core.
Well, I'll start with, I'm in sunny Southern California, and we've been covered with clouds, so I haven't seen the sun yet. We came up here from Texas, just pointing that out. I use the definition of cloud a lot like most people. It can mean different things to different people. In relation to correlation, being able to abstract yourself, free yourself from a single piece of hardware, an IBM P8, P9, on an AIX operating system that you can't move to AWS or Azure or Google or pick a cloud. That's part of the issue. Being able to free yourself, to untether yourself from that anchor, that there's nothing wrong with AIX. It's been around for a long time. Everyone knows it's very stable, it runs great, but times have changed. Being able to take your core for your credit union and you choose where that goes, AWS, Azure, you can pick a place to put it. And you don't just pick a place because it's a cloud, you pick a place because it brings value to the credit union. Cloud, by many people's definition, is just someone else's computers. That may be true, but it's someone else's computers and you don't have to manage. You don't have to do the upkeep, the maintenance. You have an uptime, you have disaster recovery built in. So cloud encompasses all of those things. And I'll stop there and let everyone else go.
I think one of the points you started off making was being tethered down by AIX and IBM. The first step in making any migration that we're talking about today would really be migrating to Linux. We've had a lot of these conversations. Our go-forward strategy with implementation of Keystone has transitioned over the years as technology has changed. Like Trent said, IBM, AIX, very powerful system, been around a long time, very stable, transaction processing speed, very good. The technology has changed, x86 has caught up, whether it be transaction processing as well as reliability. And with that, operating systems like Linux have been predominant in the industry. So with the release or with the support of Linux for Keystone, that was a great opportunity to start having these conversations. So if you're already on Linux today, you've already taken that first step. If you're on AIX and IBM and you're coming up to your end of life on that hardware, we definitely recommend looking at migrating over to Linux at that time.
Any questions real quick? Yes.
So is the recommendation to migrate to Linux in the data center first and then migrate to AWS, or take it all in one step?
I can take that. I think that would be the best strategy. We were talking to somebody earlier today, especially if you're looking at a hardware refresh now, it would be to do a platform migration in-house to x86. And then you could actually just even do an HADR takeover. You wouldn't have to go through another platform migration because you would be going from x86 technology on Linux to x86 technology on Linux. So that would definitely be my recommendation. Don't try to do it all in one shot, especially being the first or second one into the cloud. I would do it in-house first.
And for those in the back, the question was just, do you step to Linux first, or you just jump? You could just jump. So I think you guys all heard Eben's response there.
And just to add to that, based on when you do your migration to Linux, you can keep that same infrastructure. Doesn't mean you're only going to have that AWS disaster recovery. With Keystone, you have the ability to have up to 3 connections for HADR. So you can keep your existing infrastructure with your colo location, but just add another connection up into the cloud, as opposed to changing your infrastructure completely. You're just adding another one.
So, you know me, I'm not wearing a hat today, but maybe you have a red hat, black hat, blue hat, whatever it is. Tell us a little bit about Red Hat Linux versus, Windows, or how they're different. Why would there be a benefit for one or the other?
Well, let's see how much time we have left. Linus Torvaldi created that kernel for what's called Linux today, and there's been different companies who have capitalized and commercialized that to bring a little bit of sustained maintenance, one throat to choke for help. Red Hat was one of the early companies that did that. The difference between Linux and Windows at a very high level, Linux is a much smaller operating system. It has a smaller kernel. It's not trying to do everything inside the operating system. It's very solid, very stable, very small. Doesn't have the graphical user interface. So when you go to Windows and you drag the mouse and you see all the colors, that's Windows, that's a Mac OS. Underneath is Linux. Mac OS now runs on a version of Unix, which is where Linux came from. So it's just a different way to deliver the applications to you. At the end of the day, Linux is very, very solid. I shared with you, and I'll share with the group here, if you've never heard the term LAMP, LAMP is Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. The LAMP stack represents the majority of the internet worldwide. So all the sites you go to, all the things you go to, well, I'm going to age myself. I say Facebook. I don't know what the current one is.
MySpace, that's the current one, right?
Yeah, MySpace. So let's start there. They run on that LAMP stack. So Linux has been around for quite some time. It has grown to dominate the internet for the back-end processing. Where Windows, I think we're all comfortable with Windows. We run Windows 10, Windows 11. We have our Windows servers. It's a much larger operating system. There's nothing wrong with it. But for raw performance, for raw stability, Linux with that very small kernel, that very small operating part, goes a long way towards performance and stability, where Windows, and I don't know how many have installed something on Windows, but when it says, do you want to continue anyway? So Windows is telling you, this probably won't work. It's going to cause problems. Do you want to continue anyway? And you say yes. And that's where the world of hurt begins. Whereas with Linux, that's not even an option. It's either coded to work or it doesn't. That's my technical answer.
Now, one of the interesting things I've learned is that what's the most prominent operating system utilized on Azure?
That is a good point.
It's not Windows, which is
Linux.
both owned by Microsoft, it's Linux. So I think Microsoft even sees the value there.
And touching base what you were saying about the power systems, I've been with power systems probably 15 to 16 years, and I didn't believe that a power system could be beat out by an x86 system as far as speed and all that. I always firmly believe that was the way to go. One of the stats you were talking about, we've done our own benchmarking testing on power systems as well as these x86 machines, and the results are phenomenal. That x86 has caught up in technology and is now able to surpass it.
So talking a little bit, oh yeah.
I had a question. You mentioned something about DB2 versus SQL and being able to use SQL instead. Can you elaborate on that?
Not use SQL instead. I was stating the test results that Red Hat released, they use a Microsoft SQL running on Linux to achieve the million transactions. I apologize, I wasn't trying to say that Keystone runs on Microsoft SQL. Keystone uses DB2.
Right, okay, thank you.
So no matter if you're on power or you have x86 Linux, it'll still be DB2 with your version.
Yes.
So does DB2 run on Linux, or is that something different?
It does, yes.
It does.
It is different in the underlying technology, so it's not able to just use like HADR between two different platforms OSs, but it still has DB2, still installs and runs the same whole system.
And keep in mind, we're talking about Keystone here, of course. The functionality that you see on a IBM AIX DB2 stack of Keystone, the functionality today is going to be the same that you would see on an x86 Linux DB2 environment. But with Linux, and I mentioned this yesterday, there's a lot more options out there, and it's the Linux community is continually growing. So we might be leveraging some of the feature functionality on Linux, even more so as it becomes the most prominent operating system that our client base is on.
Has Corelation taken the client's database and put it in the cloud and tested it?
So
Go ahead, please.
Yes, we have. So we've done it both in Azure and AWS systems. We've have not clients data, but we've had our own test databases up there and run benchmarking on it, and even run an on-prem server with HADR in the cloud.
How large are those databases?
Well, so in our internal testing, it was smaller, but we've actually got a 10 million member database where we generated the 10 million members as a test database, but that's how big it is.
So we've generated a 10 million member database with 10 million accounts, 10 million shares, 12 million shares, 12 million loans. I can give you the stats. It was large.
So we've talked a little bit about the vast kind of benefits or opportunities that lie with Linux. Tell us a little bit about what a migration might look like.
So for platform migration, right now what we're doing is, first of all, we have a lot of clients already live on Linux. That's our new primary offering, so any converting clients will be on a Linux x86 platform. So we have several in flight. We've had a lot. I think the stats were put up yesterday of how many were live. Platform migration is you're going from AIX to a Linux environment. And again, I mentioned that the technology is different, so you can't just connect to HADR and do a takeover and be good. So what actually happens is you have to extract the data, so go through an export process. Your database will be down, which means your system will be down. It does the export. We'll take that data, we'll send it over to your new x86 Linux system, and then we do an import. And part of that process, all the programs are taking the database structure and making sure it's the same database structure that gets built on the other imports of data, so everything's going to be exact when you come up. But it depends on that downtime while we're pulling data out, because you can't have any transactions going in, how long will be down. And a lot of that, which is why we've been pushing the different presentations on purging, the more you purge, the smaller your database, the less downtime you'll have. So, but that'll normally be it. We'll do it on we'll do a mock. So there's actually a team that'll be at the vendor help desk in the Corelation booth there that can give you more detailed information. But we'll do a project with you, a discovery call, make sure you have the right hardware, and then do a mock. So we'll take a test database, go through all that, make sure you guys know on your side what we're going to do when we bring the new system up for validation, check some balancing before we bring it down, and balancing we bring it up, because again, it should be identical from point to point, and then you come back up and you're all good to go.
So we just missed Memorial Day, so like July 4th and
We have one going on the 17th, and there's plenty of room if you're interested. Come on by.